welcome. Tonight, we're traveling back to a time of smoke-filled hearths, creaking floorboards, and flickering candlelight, a time not of parades or declarations, but of waiting, wondering, and surviving. This is not the American Revolution of textbooks or fireworks. This is the quieter side, the muddy side, the exhausting, everyday side. We'll meet a man whose radical words once inspired a nation and then slowly faded from its memory. We'll wander forgotten fields, where soldiers rest without names. And finally, we'll step into the elegant world of the colonial elite, where powdered wigs and whispered scandals danced just out of reach of cannon fire. We'll begin in the shoes of an ordinary person, trying to navigate the hardship of life during the Revolutionary War. Let your thoughts drift as we begin. The past is waiting distant, softened by time, and ready to unfold, one detail at a time. Let's begin. Imagine yourself in the year 1777. You live in a modest wooden house near the outskirts of Concord, Massachusetts, or perhaps in a clay-chinked cabin tucked somewhere in Virginia. The floor beneath your feet is uneven. Packed dirt if you're unlucky, wide wooden planks if you're a little more fortunate. The roof leaks when it rains. The windows rattle in the wind, and the shutters creak when you open them each morning. It's cold this year, colder than last. Your mornings begin before sunrise. You stretch your meals with root vegetables, turnips, potatoes, onions when you have them, and a bit of flour if the last ration wagon made it through. There is no alarm, only the stirring of livestock or the low murmur of your children beginning to wake. You rise in the dimness, wrapped in a threadbare woolen shawl or a stiff linen work shirt. Some wear no coat at all, just rags, stained breeches, and boots falling apart at the seams. The fire has gone out overnight, so your first task is to stir the ashes and coax it back to life. The air is heavy with smoke and damp wool, and yet all you see is suffering. Your neighbors starving, your cousin conscripted, your barn reduced to ash after a passing patrol mistook your lantern for a signal. They come in tired, quiet, smelling of smoke and horses and unwashed skin. They take your firewood, they eat your bread. Some days, it's the only thing you trust. The fire flickers, the house groans softly as the night wind stirs. They sleep in your children's beds while your family huddles together in the corner. You try not to complain. You know that to raise your voice could bring punishment or worse. Food is never guaranteed. Salt pork has grown scarce. The British blockade makes trade unreliable, and the Continental Congress's paper money buys less with each passing week. Outside, the road is thick with mud. Soldiers pass by often. Some wear blue coats, others red. Of neighbors who smiled at your door. Across the colonies, thousands like you carry the burden of history, not with speeches, but with quiet, grinding persistence. Sometimes they knock, sometimes they don't. When soldiers are quartered in your home, there's no discussion. The towns are filled with rumor. Some say the British have retaken New York. Others whispered that General Washington has been defeated. There is no reliable news, just the talk of weary travelers, anxious clergy, and the tavern's loudest patrons. You are not sure which side to trust. The crown offers stability, protection, perhaps peace, but the rebels speak of liberty, of a life without distant kings and endless taxes. Disease lingers constantly. Smallpox still claims lives. You keep a sprig of rosemary near the door, a superstition passed down from your mother. The scent is sharp, grounding. In the evenings, when the work is done, if there is ever a moment of stillness, you sit by the hearth, hands aching from labor, eyes stinging with smoke. Outside, in the distance, you hear the thud of horses, or maybe cannon. It's hard to say. You hold your children a little tighter and tell them stories of a time before war, of bread that came fresh from the oven. But the truth is, war has become the rhythm of your life, a constant thrum behind every sunrise and every sigh. You are not a soldier, not a general, not a signer of declarations. You are simply trying to endure. And in this, you are not alone. That is what it was really like during the American Revolution. Up next, we shift from the silent resilience of the everyday to the fiery words of a man who believed his pen could spark a revolution. Let us turn now to Thomas Paine. Now, let us step away from the smoky hearths and muddy roads of war-torn towns and turn our attention to a man who believed in the quiet power of the written word. A man who arrived in America with little more than a few coins in his pocket and a mind full of fire. His name was Thomas Paine. He was born in 1737 in Thetford, a small town in eastern England. His father was a Quaker, a staymaker by trade, someone who crafted the stiff undergarments worn beneath dresses and coats. It was a humble life, quiet, constrained. Thomas, even as a boy, had little patience for silence. He was restless, curious, opinionated. He tried his hand at many trades: corset making, tax collecting, tutoring, even a brief stint aboard a privateer ship. But nothing held him. His fortunes shifted when he met Benjamin Franklin in London. Franklin saw something in him, something sharp, something brave. With Franklin's letter of recommendation tucked into his belongings, Thomas sailed for the American colonies in 1774. He arrived in Philadelphia sick with fever and nearly destitute. But within months, he was writing, and in 1776 he released a pamphlet that would alter the course of history. It was called Common Sense. The writing was plain, direct, and accessible. It didn't pander to the elite or hide behind lofty Latin phrases. It spoke to blacksmiths and bakers, to farmers, and it said, quite simply, that the colonies should govern themselves, that monarchy was unnatural, that liberty, true liberty, was worth fighting for. Over 100,000 copies sold in just a few months. It was, for its time, a literary wildfire. Paine became a household name. He donated the profits of Common Sense to the war effort. He refused to profit from the revolution. He believed in the cause, but fame is a fickle companion. In the years that followed, Paine's radical ideas continued to evolve. He traveled to France and supported the French Revolution. He wrote another book, The Rights of Man, defending revolution and challenging monarchy across Europe. In America, many began to distance themselves from him. His views were becoming too bold, too dangerous. Then, in 1794, while in France, he wrote The Age of Reason. It was a critique of institutional religion, an argument that reason, not faith, should guide humanity. He did not attack spirituality, but he questioned the authority of churches, scriptures, and organized doctrine. In America, the backlash was swift. Once hailed as a patriot, Paine was now denounced as a blasphemer. Ministers called him wicked. Old allies stopped returning his letters. He returned to the United States in 1802. Older, frail, and nearly forgotten, the nation he helped inspire had no welcome for him. He lived in a small house in New York, often in poor health and entirely alone. When he died in 1809, only a handful of people attended his funeral. Newspapers mocked him. His obituary, in many places, was a whisper. His grave would later be dug up, his remains shipped to England by an admirer hoping to build a monument. But the monument was never built, and his bones were lost. Even in death, Thomas Paine was unclaimed. But his words never truly vanished. You may not see his face on a dollar bill, or etched into the marble of great monuments, but his voice, clear, defiant, and uncompromising, echoes through the documents of revolution, through the pages of democracy, through the belief that people can govern themselves, not perfectly, but freely. And so, in the long, lonely life of Thomas Paine, we find not just the arc of one man's rise and fall, but the quiet cost of saying what others are afraid to say. And now, we move from the living memory of a radical mind to something quieter, something buried, forgotten by most, but not by time. Let us journey into the mystery of the lost graves, of the revolution. Now, let the story slow even further. Let the flickering fire fade to quiet embers. Let the world narrow to the hush of falling leaves and the sound of footsteps in soft earth. We're going to walk through places where few people walk. Fields once filled with gunpowder, smoke, and shouted orders, now still overgrown with wild grasses and wind-worn stones. This is the quiet domain of the forgotten. The soldiers of the American Revolution, tens of thousands of them left behind little more than names scratched in muster rolls and letters worn thin with age, and many left not even that. They died not only in battlefields, but in makeshift hospitals, in forests, in barns, commandeered as barracks. They died of fever, of infected wounds, of hunger and cold. Many were buried quickly, and simply there was no time, often, for ceremony. The ground was too hard in winter, the dead too many in summer. They were wrapped in blankets, if one was available, or not, laid in shallow graves, marked with a wooden cross or sometimes with nothing at all. And then the war moved on. Over the centuries, these graves were covered over by farms, by roads, by buildings. Their markers rotted away or were never placed. Their names were lost in the silence that follows after noise. But the earth remembers. In scattered places across the eastern seaboard, archaeologists and volunteers still seek to find them, not with flags or songs, but with brushes and ground-penetrating radar, with old maps, with quiet reverence. In Saratoga, New York, in Camden, South Carolina, in the tangled woods of Pennsylvania and the marshes of Georgia, excavations have uncovered buttons, bits of bone, fragments of uniforms, small things, but they tell big stories. In one field, a cluster of musket balls is found, nestled together, tucked beside what appears to be the remains of a pouch. The soldier never got to reload. He died, clutching his final rounds. In another site, skeletons are found laid side by side, carefully arranged. Someone, even in the chaos, took time to place them. Perhaps a fellow soldier, perhaps a townsman, burying the unknown with care. These discoveries are not always announced. Many are quietly studied, recorded, then reburied with more dignity than they had before. Some are given markers, some ceremonies, others are simply acknowledged. And there's a deeper mystery to how do we remember a war when so many who fought in it are no longer remembered by name, when their stories were never written down. Public monuments often focus on generals, on victories, on declarations, but beneath the surface there are thousands of unspoken stories. Young men from distant counties, free black soldiers whose names were misspelled or never listed, women who disguised themselves as men and were buried as such. They all vanish into the soil. The lost graves of the Revolution remind us that history is not only made in Congress halls and battlefield triumphs, it is made quietly, in cold rain, in worn shoes, in anonymous sacrifice. Perhaps that's why we find ourselves drawn to these quiet mysteries, because they echo something in us, a desire not to be forgotten, a hope that someone, somewhere, will care enough to remember. So we walk these overgrown fields. We read the faded letters. We brush the dust from rusted buttons, and we whisper, "Thank you," even when we don't know their names. Now, as the shadows lengthen and the air grows stiller, we leave behind the lost and humble and step into the candlelit world of the privileged few, the world of drawing rooms and silver platters, of laced cuffs and whispered gossip. Come with me into the ballrooms of the revolution's elite. And now, let the hush of wilderness give way to the soft clink of crystal, the shuffle of slippers on polished floorboards, and the delicate strains of a string quartet warming up in the distance. We have arrived not in a tent or a tavern, but in the grand home of a wealthy colonial family. Somewhere in Philadelphia, or perhaps Savannah, the year is 1776. The war has begun, but here, in this candlelit room, its distant thunder has not yet shaken the Tonight, there is a ball. You are a guest. You have powdered your wig, tightened your stays, and stepped out of the dusty street into a world of flickering candlelight, warm beeswax polish, and the quiet rustle of silk skirts and brocade coats. Your gloves are slightly too tight. The air smells faintly of perfume, citrus, and lavender, and underneath it all, beeswax, baked bread, and the trace of sweat concealed beneath layers of etiquette. The drawing room is wide, the ceilings high, the windows draped in imported fabric from France. A harp sits idle near the corner, and portraits of the host's ancestors gaze down from above the fireplace, their oil-painted faces faintly disapproving. A servant in livery offers you a glass of rum punch, spiced, sweet, and far too strong. Around you, conversation murmurs like wind through leaves. There is talk of the war, of course, but it is cloaked in civility. She's married to a loyalist. Poor thing. I hear the general himself may pass through town next week. Did you see her dress? French muslin smuggled in. No doubt. The music begins. A minuet, each step measured, each movement You join a line of couples, exchanging polite smiles, avoiding eye contact that lingers too long. Beneath the refinement lies tension, not passion, but calculation. Every bow, every curtsy is political. Alliances are hinted at in a glance. Reputations can rise or fall with a whispered comment passed near the punch bowl. This is not a world without fear. Even here, among polished silver and candlelight, anxiety hums just beneath the surface. The elite of the colony's planters, merchants, lawyers, and their families stand at the edge of a precipice. Some support the rebellion quietly, hedging their bets. Others remain fiercely loyal to the crown, unwilling to jeopardize the trade networks, titles, and inherited status that tie them to England. Still others try to live between the two worlds, offering donations to local militias while maintaining tea shipments from London. This ball, like many, is more than a social gathering. It is an arena of diplomacy, a place where political stances are softened with laughter, where flirtation masks suspicion, and where fortunes can be made or lost over a game of whist. And yet, despite it all, there is beauty here. The candles glow, the music swells. Outside, the war inches closer, but inside, for a few hours, time slows. A servant replenishes the glasses. The host's daughter plays a soft piece on the harpsichord. Two men step outside to settle a disagreement quietly. For now, tomorrow, perhaps they will duel, but tonight there are dancers left to finish. It is a fragile world. This one, a world of inherited comfort soon to be shattered. Within the decade, homes like this will be seized. Estates will be burned. Some of the guests here will flee to England, Others will reinvent themselves under a new flag, and some will simply disappear, names lost in dusty ledgers, the grand gowns packed away, never worn again, continues to breathe softly in this room of lace and quiet calculation. But for now, the candles burn low, the music plays on, and the past, and now the music is gone. The ballroom is quiet, the fields have emptied, the hearth's grown cold. The revolution, once loud and burning, has faded into parchment, memory, and silence. But if you listen closely, the echoes remain in the low creak of an old floorboard, like the ones worn smooth by boots long gone, in the rustle of wind through forgotten battlefields, where soldiers now rest without names, in the dim corners of libraries, where brittle pamphlets like common sense still whisper to those who take the time to read them, and in quiet homes like yours, where stories like these gently unfold in the night. The American Revolution is so often remembered in images of fireworks and triumph. But behind the symbols, behind the flags and parades, was something slower, harder, more human. It was not just a war. It was a moment when ordinary lives were stretched across impossible choices, when survival meant adapting, bending, or breaking. A farmer uncertain where his allegiance lies. A writer cast aside by the very people he helped awaken. A nameless soldier buried in soil that would one day be called a nation. A young woman in a brocade gown, watching her world change with every whispered rumor. They were not heroes in the way we often imagine. They were simply alive. And that, perhaps, is what makes their stories worth telling. So, tonight, as you close your eyes, let the past settle around you like a quilt worn, patched, but warm. Let the stories drift, as they always do, into dreams. And let history, just for now, become quiet. Good night, and thank you for listening.